All right, now that we have an understanding of what the massing is like, we're going to actually move into start developing the structure of the building. So we're going to start getting into some details. All of the things that you've already done, we're going to just simply apply. It's going to be a little bit more detailed. So the first thing we want to do is, I know this sounds crazy, but we're going to get rid of some of the work that we've done. We want to start, and we're going to use the model that we have to frame into. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the massing portion. Now I want to keep the massing file. So you're going to need the massing file. Do not save over that. We're going to go up to File, make sure you select File, Save As. We're going to save a new file, and instead of calling it massing, we're going to call it stahl structure. And this is where we're going to develop the stahl structure. Case study house number 22, whichever you like better. So once we get through that save process, you can see it's spinning on my laptop. It's a little slow. We're going to basically start. And one of the things that we know, if we take a look at the building, we have got basically a fairly straightforward structure. We've got vertical columns, and we've got a horizontal beam across the top, and it sits directly on top of those steel flange columns. And then we have a series of steel columns on the outside with a channel that ties it all together. So the structure is actually very straightforward, and it's going to be fairly simple to model with just a few little details. So we'll break the video up into a couple little pieces so it doesn't get too long. We're going to start by creating the column structure, and then we'll move on to the beams and then on to the roof joists or the ceiling joists that are also beams as well. So back in SketchUp, I'm going to zoom into the model to a place where I have one of those wide flange columns. And you can see the column right here in the center. And the one thing that's tricky, that I just keep doing, is we've got a lot of line work. And I know it can get a little confusing. So I'm going to try and zoom back in and get us a nice clear shot at that model. And again, we want to really work as much as we can in blocks. So I'm going to use my rectangle command, and I'm going to break the column up into 3 different little pieces. So there's the flange, the center web, and the outside flange. And before I get too far, I'm going to turn this into a component this time. So I'm going to double click, make sure I get all of the pieces. Double click too far. And I'm going to make that a component. And this time I'm going to call it, let's just call it wall column. And I'm going to create my column. So now that it is an object of its own, I am going to extrude it up. And we've got to extrude it up in a couple pieces. And I want to make sure that it remains one solid piece. So I'm going to remove the little lines that separate the 3 cubes that I made. And now what you'll see is that it begins to behave as a single column, where I can pull the entire column up. If you noticed, I skipped the foundation. We didn't talk about the floor or the foundation at all. In this building, we don't particularly see the foundation. We do see the floor, but we're going to add that in later so we don't get too confusing. So I'm now going to grab the top of that column, and I'm going to pull it right up to the intersection where it meets, and the next beam will sit right on top of it. So now I've developed the column for the building. Now, typically, in structural plans, we have repetitive columns, especially commercial buildings, and we try and place those columns on what we call a column grid. And it makes a lot of sense structurally to have the column grid be equal spacing. We're going to see how close the Stahl house or these drawings actually do that. So I'm going to select our column. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to select Move, and by holding down the Control key, I'm going to just move the column over to the next column location, and it fits really nicely. From there, what I'm going to do is zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to type in X10 and hit enter. Now I obviously have extra columns, so I tried to copy that column all the way across that whole row. So I didn't need 10, let's try X times 8, nope, times 7, and I'm just using the X to type in the 7. So now what I've done is I've taken my column and I've copied it all the way across the back of the house. Now there are a couple little things that we need to check. One of those is that right here we have a pair of glass doors. Between those glass doors, we actually don't have a column. And if you look at the floor plan, there's just a block sitting between those two. I'm going to go in and we're going to go ahead and create that block and make it I'm going to just make this one a group because I don't really need to modify it again. So it's just going to be its own group. But I am going to pull it up to match the height of the rest of my columns. Kind of zooming in and out a little bit here, but we'll pull that all the way up to match the underside of the beam because the beam still will sit right on top of it. The other thing that I want to check is I want to just take a look at the columns and make sure that they aren't rotated. And if we come to the back side, we can see by the drawing and line work underneath that this back column is actually facing a different direction. So we'll go ahead and go through and rotate that one, select a base point and rotate it. And I'm going to type in 90 degrees and move it right back into place so it's sitting where it should sit. Not too bad, right? So now what we'll do is we know we have another bank of columns that come across the other side to hold up the ceiling structure. I'm going to go in, I'm going to hold down my shift key, and it allows me to singly select all of the entities, including the little block between the doors that I've created. And like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and move a copy of those. I'm going to select the move command, hold down the control key, and move those columns from a base point to the other edge of the base point. And now I've got columns running on one side of my building. And we have our little block that goes between our glass doors. You can see by the line work in the bottom of the drawing that there's two doors here, and these are solid glass infill panels on the other side. And one thing that is a little wacky is we don't have a big column right in the center where the bathroom and storage and pantry area are. So we'll delete that column out, and I think we're in fairly good shape. So we do have columns that run across the other side of the building. So what we'll do is go ahead and take care of all of our columns while we're doing it. Let's double check that that one's facing the right way, and it is. And we're going to go ahead and make a copy of that column. And we'll again hold down control while using the move key. And I'll place that. And I'm going to just type in X5 and see what happens. I think we need more columns. Oh, way too many columns. And they may not actually be lined up where we need them. That was a pretty broad column move there. So let's just go in and we'll double check. Well, then again, I think we did okay. Now we've got one here that we missed, so we'll grab this one and we'll go ahead and just copy it over. And you don't have to use the repetitive copy command if you don't want. It's not bad to just make sure you make a copy of all the columns. I believe that is all of the columns we have on that side. And let's go ahead and do the same thing that we did before, and we will copy them as a group to the front edge of the model. And we'll just double check again to make sure that they line up. And I think we did a pretty good job of getting our columns all to line up. Excellent. And we'll double check and see what's going on here, but I have a feeling we have a couple other little framing members that are helping support these spans of glass. Those are pretty big spans of glass. So we'll add those. Let's go ahead and add those in now so we don't skip a step. And again, with these smaller objects, I'm going to just make them a group. And then we'll push the group up to match the column heights. And if I hover over the column extrusion, I can just hover next to the column and I should be set. We may have to add a piece on the back, but those look like larger frames, so we'll kind of see when we get there. And keep in mind, this is the first time we're doing this, so we may end up making some changes. Don't be afraid. Oops, I missed the control key. Make a copy. Don't be afraid to make mistakes when you're modeling. They happen a little bit. And that completes the creation of our columns. So I'm in the stahl structure file. I'm going to go ahead and save my work.